Hello, welcome to the November 2022 edition of the Wisconsin Bankers Association Compliance Corner. Scott and I are happy to be with you today to spend the next few minutes talking about a few of the items that have been recently released by the federal agencies dealing with compliance, and then also a state component which will become effective January of 2023 that we want to make sure is on your radar. So our format for this short video will be similar to our past videos in that we'll have an agenda of the topics that Scott and I plan to cover, as well as highlights of the covered topics and links that will accompany the video for which you can pull the resource items that we're talking about to read through those more directly. For all the items that we'll be talking about in this video, we do have a asterisks by the topic, so that will correspond to the link that I just mentioned is being made available. So in this particular session, we have the following agenda items pulled for you. We're first going to be talking about an interagency fair lending webinar, which is coming up. Also, two different items that have been recently released by the CFPB that have a bunch of information found within that we want to make sure is on, again, your radar. We also have some fraud-related topics. We have an addition to an existing toolkit that the Federal Reserve has as it relates to synthetic identity. And also, FinCEN has recently put together an analysis of the trends that they're seeing in CTR and other BSA-related reports. Also, HUD has expanded some of their procedures for what they are willing to accept in the context of flood-related insurance or flood insurance. And then also the state law that I mentioned, there's a Act 258, which will be effective here January of 2023 that we want to make sure is on your radar. So the first topic that we're going to be talking about here briefly this morning is the Fair Lending webinar. And for those of you that were at the compliance forum last week, the agency has actually talked about this upcoming webinar in the panel discussion. And the webinar is coming up December 6th. There is a link for you to register for this particular webinar. And we've included for you the agencies that will be speaking in that webinar and the variety of topics that you'll see. So you'll see redlining, appraisal bias, special purpose credit programs, and other supervisory or enforcement related updates from the agencies. With these webinars, the agencies always allow for a Q&A session. So stay tuned when you listen to that. Don't hang up too early. Listen to the Q&As, which are always at the end of that particular webinar. If by chance the date does not work in your schedule, know that the Federal Reserve Consumer Compliance Outlook page always keeps those webinars posted on their website. So you can always go back and play that at a later date. So know that that's an option for you if in fact you can't make the December 6th webinar, but register if you can. Also on this particular topic, last week at Compliance Forum, we did hear the regulators talk about how the fair lending component, the appraisal bias piece, is actually going to be pulled from current compliance resources and actually going to be created as an interagency guidance on the topic of appraisal bias and fair lending as a future release. We don't have a particular date for when we can expect to see that, but because of the focus, we anticipate that it'll be sooner rather than later. So another reason to listen to the webinar and glean some insider information from the agencies. So with that, Scott, I'll turn it over to you for our next topic, please.
All right. Thanks, Heather. So here we have on slide 4, 2 items from CFPB. So first, we've got the CFPB Fall 2022 Supervisory Highlights, and then a bulletin on crypto asset complaints. So within this first item on the supervisory highlights, we have some areas which CFPB has identified various violations. And so I won't read them off, but we've highlighted some of them on the slide for you. But we wanted to make you aware of what CFPB is finding. And what you'll see by just looking at and glancing through these lists is that there's not necessarily anything new here. And it's not to say what we have necessarily heard Wisconsin banks engage in these practices, but of course is worth noting to ensure that you're checking and confirming with your operations and not running afoul of any of these practices. And one thing along those lines that you might want to be thinking when you're looking through these highlights is that you're ensuring that you're engaged with staff. Communication is a big one. And again, understanding those operational components that can go into causing some of the trip ups here. And for those of you at Compliance Forum, again, the other week, the regulators touched on this in general, not these supervisory highlights, but again, this concept that is coming to play with why we're seeing these violations. And again, that's the importance of talking with frontline staff, with processors and others involved in the relevant areas of operation to understand that, for example, various servicing requirements are indeed being met. Policies and procedures are being followed. Disclosures are being given. They're being given in accordance with proper timing. They're accurate and they're not misleading. Fees are being charged correctly. Because those are the types of errors that we see in this fall highlights that CFPB is identifying. Then, of course, the other item, crypto. So crypto, of course, continues to be, and we suspect it will continue to be, a hot topic. And so here, CFPB has provided a bulletin. This highlights information that was gathered through consumer complaints regarding crypto-related fraud and scams. So here, we're, again, focusing on really those fraud, scams, areas that are being misled for consumers, and they're complaining that they're not understanding, various areas of crypto or being subject to scams. And so the big takeaway here, we would say, is, again, communication. So particularly here on the consumer side, communication with your consumers and good customer service, right? Good response to those complaints, understanding these areas of crypto, understanding, be it something that the bank is engaged in, or services you're providing to your customers, or services that they in your area might be experiencing or might be dealing with. Understanding the various frauds and prevalent schemes that are going around to know that your customers might be subject to that and might call and might have questions about whether this is valid and what this means. So again, similar to the concept we derive from the supervisory highlights, when you're looking through this bulletin, think about communication, not just with your staff and so that they understand the tools that are available to talk to customers, but also when you're engaged in that and what your consumer complaint process is. We all know that crypto is a heightened area of fraud and scams. So again, understanding those common scams, understanding the channels of communication you have, and those financial literacy opportunities where appropriate, and of course, reporting suspicious activity. So again, we have some aspects of the data highlighted on that slide, but you can find those issuances in the description below. So the next one on slide 5. So similarly, on the topic of fraud, but separately, are synthetic IDs. So this is an issue that we've been hearing a lot about recently. And essentially, this is a situation where you have all of the individual pieces of information to create an ID for what is being represented as a person. So a customer, in this case, all of the individual components are valid, but the overall identity itself is fraudulent, does not actually represent a person who exists. And we see this most commonly on applications, usually online, given the ability to quickly and easily apply for banking services or products through my phone or through a web portal. That's typically where we see it. So you have maybe an accurate name, an accurate address, an accurate social, et cetera. But that's all piecemeal from different individuals who are not representing the actual applicant here. So FRB's Toolkit is designed to help explain what synthetic IDs are, to identify them, to know the potential implications. And really, this is from a payment system standpoint. And to that extent, this is certainly worth looking at to better understand it and see it. And FRB plans to update these modules and maintain them. And they're really well laid out for looking at it and seeing the implications for where you might encounter this in the payment system. What is a synthetic ID? Common indicators, how to combat it, how to spot it and deal with it, depending on the various technologies that are involved. So again, I know that with many of you, this is an issue that you've been seeing. So we wanted to point this out as a new tool that is out there. Take a look at those modules. And again, the link is in the description below for that. On slide 6, we have a FinCEN analysis. So this is for ransomware-related BSA filings. And the findings here reflect quite a significant increase from 2020. And you can see the data here on the slide that we pulled directly from the report. The report, of course, going into more detail on that. They've got trends and analysis, and you can really see the uptick here that is being tracked from those filings that everyone is making. That analysis, in addition to those statistics to kind of give you that impression of what we're seeing and have an overall awareness of what's going on with these ransomware related attacks and where they're coming from, also includes detection and mitigation recommendations. So it's something you can take back to your operations, to your tech side, and check to see what you have in place for your own detection, for your own reporting, again, from your system component standpoint. So take a look for that. We have the link in there. And then the last item that I just wanted to mention for you is on slide 7 here. So as Heather mentioned, we have some new flood provisions here. And I should clarify, of course, we've had private flood for a while, right? We've had private flood since 2019. So it's not that we have new private flood rules. Rather, after we had the new interagency flood provisions issued, HUD proposed a rule in 2020 to give the option for private flood on FHA loans. And then just this month in November, finalized that rule. So that final rule will be effective on December 21st of this year, which will then make private flood available for those FHA-insured mortgages. That said, do note that while HUD's rule is similar to the interagency private rules, there are some slight nuances to it. For example, the compliance aid that I know many of you will likely have in your private flood policies and procedures to check that, or maybe for discretionary acceptance, private flood, and what you look at and the factors you look at to accept those private flood rules. HUD has its own requirements. So again, make sure to take a look at your policies and procedures. If you are looking to update those in accordance with HUD's procedures for FHA loans, and factoring in that there may be additional nuances that you want to look for, again, as an example, in those compliance aids. So with that, I will turn it over to Heather for our final item on the Wisconsin business law rewrite.
Super. Thank you, Scott. And as Scott mentioned, we do have a rewrite of our business law, or certain areas of our business law. And that new law can be found in 2021 Wisconsin Act 258. And we've provided a link to that actual act. When you click on that link, don't fall off your chair. It's a long act, near 500 pages. But the length of it does not mean that it invalidates your contracts with your business customers at all. The reason why it is so long is because there were lots of little tweaks that needed to be done through several of the business statute sections to make their consistent language throughout a number of different statute sections. So there's 2 statutes that we're going to be focusing on in our brief conversation here today. That being Chapter 179, which deals with the limited partnership rules, and Chapter 183, which deals with the limited liability company rules, or LLCs. So know that that's the bulk of what the actual act language is. And then again, there's little tweaks here and there through the other statute sections, like the general partnership rule and even the corporation language. So stay tuned for December Compliance Journal. We will have a much more detailed article on the changes, but we did want to at least alert you to some changes that then will help you with maybe some new terms that you might be seeing, or maybe some new forms that your customers might be filing with DFI. So first, very briefly here on slide number 8, we have just a little bit of a background information piece that what this act has done is it's repealed the existing Chapter 179 and put in place a brand new one with new terms. And what the reason for that is it's because the state has adopted revisions to the Uniform Limited Partnership Rule from past years and quote unquote modernized it and Wisconsinized it a little bit. And through those changes, what you'll see is there'll be some new documents, new information filed with DFI, who remains to be the office that people file with to create their entities. So we have a bullet on that particular filing component. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that you were aware of is now underneath this revised limited partnership rule. You could have a limited partnership where a person is both a general partner as well as a limited partner. So if a new customer comes in and they share that they are holding both of those positions, know that that's a possibility. And know that you might be listing the same person in those capacities twice within your documentation. The rule also clarifies what can be a title of a limited partnership company. And so there's some clarification there. And then the bulk of the changes really do affect the true operations of a partnership back at the partnership's office. Not that it's going to be changing, again, your contracts with your partnership customers. This is really meant to help clarify partnership agreements and whether or not the partnership agreement will trump a provision within the statute or not. And it clarifies partnership liabilities. So it's really meant to clarify the duties that these various partners hold with each other. What it also does is it also allows for a limited partnership to form a new form of partnership referred to as an LLP, or a limited liability limited partnership. And there may be some business reasons for doing so, primarily around partnership liability, that your business customers would be making the determination of which business entity to go with back at the office, not at the bank, but back at the office with their own legal counsel involved. So going on to the next slide, then we carried on some of the information onto the next slide, number 9, where this act also made some changes about how do partnerships merge, how do they convert to a different type of business entity, other type of business combination transactions between partnerships here in Wisconsin and partnerships that were created outside of the state of Wisconsin. We did want you to know that, again, January 1, as we mentioned before, of 2023 is the effective date of this new law. So all businesses coming into existence after the beginning of the year will follow this new law. Any partnership, limited partnership that has been in existence prior to January 1 of 2023 will then automatically be subject to this law unless they file an exemption with DFI. So if they file a non-participation or a type of a document that says we don't want to participate in this new area of law with DFI before the end of this year, then current law, so the law that we've been playing with for a while here underneath Chapter 179, will apply to that limited partnership, not the new area of law. And that same theory will follow through with the LLC law we'll talk about here in just a moment. Act 258 also made some minor changes to the general partnership rules, just primarily with what gets filed with DFI, and again, some of the rights and responsibilities of partners amongst each other. Only wanted to mention that fact. Again, it's not going to invalidate any of your contracts with your partnerships, but just wanted you to know that there's been some slight changes to Chapter 178 in our state statutes. On the next slide of our PowerPoint, we did want to highlight some of the changes to the LLCs because we know many of you have LLC customers. On a high level basis, Wisconsin looked to adopt the more recent revisions to the Uniform Limited Liability Act that were in place in 2013. Plus, we then modernized it to Wisconsin standards, so it's a little bit unique than the uniform law. It does also, like the partnership rules, modifies information that will be filed with DFI. And it also allows for an operating agreement to be in writing, to be oral, to be written, or to be an express or an implied agreement. But at bare minimum, there's going to be some form of an operating agreement, which is going to set forth the fiduciary responsibilities of the members to each other. So like what we have right now in Wisconsin, we have some LLCs that have very robust operating agreements and others who don't. And that trend will likely continue underneath this new law, where you'll have some LLCs that will have very robust operating agreements and others will have the bare minimum of what is required by statute. So there is a little tweak there, but just know that you'll still see some differences between your LLC customers and who has a robust or a very small operating agreement. The rest of the slide is just really meant to show that the bulk of the changes by Act 258 are done to provisions that don't apply to the bank, that instead really do apply to how a member is to be operating its LLC generally, and what rights they have and what interests they have and how they protect each other from those various rights and liabilities. So the rest of the laundry list there on this slide is just a high-level review of those particular instances, since they don't directly impact the bank. This particular section of the statutes, that being the revision to 183, has the same effective date, that being January 1st of 2023, where automatically everyone gets to play by that new rule, unless, again, the LLC files a statement with DFI saying that no, they don't wish to have that new law applied to them. So in a nutshell, just be aware of this particular act. Again, we'll have more information in the upcoming December's Wisconsin WBA Compliance Journal. But just wanted to make sure that you were aware that there are some minor changes here. You don't have to throw out your contracts. You may have some information that your customer might be bringing in that you can file or have your commercial officer be aware of, but know that it doesn't change your existing contracts with your business customers. So with that, Scott, I'll forward it back to you for our wrap up here.
Great. Thanks, Heather. And so, yeah, as we wrap it up, just wanted to remind everyone of the resources that are available to you. So on the WBA website, you'll find compliance tools and publications and other training resources. That link is on all the slides down below. And so I wanted to encourage everyone, after we wrap up and you close out of this video, to go out onto our website and check it out. As Heather and I have mentioned in the past, it's something that we are updating regularly to keep those resources fresh and bring you new content as it comes up. And we really want that webpage to be the place that you can go to check in regularly and get that new, fresh resources in various topics. So, of course, in addition to the Compliance Journal publication, the monthly publication that you'll find on there, these videos, of course, as well, various Q&As and frequently requested information, you'll find toolkits. And so, for example, we had the RUPA, Wisconsin's Revised Uniform Unclaimed Property Act resource toolkit and chart that was on there that we talked about in a previous video with you here. And recently we had a number of WMA created resources that were just updated as well within the past couple months. And with those, we had a chart. We had, of course, a series of articles that appeared in the Compliance Journal. We had a Q&A section that was in there, as well as just overall discussion of how to contract with minors. Again, trying to create these holistic resources for you to use. And then in addition to that, what we had was consumer-facing resources. So again, trying to create various tools that you can use. As we know, within these various topics, WMA is an example. There are situations where you talk to your customers and they might have questions. And we thought that this would be another opportunity for a resource that you could use to be able to have those conversations more easily and present that information to them that they need to know. So again, check the website. That's where those are going to appear. We also have the best practices area of the website. So various areas that you might have, such as HR, financial crimes, or mortgage lending, or trust. You're going to find an area on the website that has best practices created by other members within the various committees dedicated to those areas that are useful for you to have and be able to tap into, again, as yet another tool that we're looking to keep and maintain on our website. So again, I would encourage everyone, after you close out of this video, to go check it out, see what's on there. Also on the horizon, we'll have some new toolkits, new Q&As, new resources, including a flood resource that we're working on. Also looking forward to new opportunities. We will be looking to host a new Legal Live soon. So if you have any topics that you want to have discussed at that, certainly reach out and let us know if there's a particular area or a particular subject, be it an area of compliance or a trend or something that you're seeing that you'd like to talk about. Let us know. We always like to hear what you like to discuss at those sessions. Then lastly, I would like to remind everyone to Not forget to call in or email to the compliance hotline if you have any questions or there's a fact pattern or a scenario or issue that you want to talk through, or something you're maybe looking at in terms of operation and reviewing that you want to get some feedback on, or a specific rule that you can't remember where something is. Always don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to talk to you and talk you through and have those discussions. So thank you everyone for joining us. With that, we will conclude our November session of the Compliance Corner.